Hey, so I want to talk a little bit about a few biblical passages, connect them together, derive another sense for them. So, just like words have multiple senses, if you look at the English language and somebody says the word bear, it could mean an animal, one that you wouldn't want to fuck with, or it could mean to like bear as in endure or carry, like a cross. And then, of course, there's a homonym there. But even bear has multiple senses. And so, it's actually a problem in parsing text is word sense disambiguation. Because the same letters in the same sequence mean different things. The Bible is no different. Biblical verses have multiple senses. And you can disambiguate them by context. Just like with the word bear, if someone says bear the cross, most people would not think of a bear and the animal and a cross together, because it seems like bear is being used as a verb and not a noun in that sense. And also bear the cross is kind of a phrase that's leaked into modern usage. So you can think of the Bible in the same way. You think of verses, passages, events, chapters, everything is multiple senses. So arguing over the meaning of any given piece of text in the Bible ignores how we use text in modern day life. You can think of many examples of words with multiple senses. So one of the things that Jesus said was, beware of false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenously ravening wolves. So Jesus offers himself sacrificially, like a sacrificial lamb, which means he comes to you in sheep's clothing. He also behaves like a prophet. So you have a prophet and sheep's clothing, and then you have the fact that, for instance, in the agony of the garden, he prays at night. He goes out alone to pray at night. And that's something that a howling wolf might do. That's a little more, you have to be a little more imaginative to get to that sense. But if you dig deeper and you understand that Jesus is talking about Taoism, pointing to it as a guide to the concept of being in harmony with the natural way of things. The yin-yang itself is circular like a moon, and it has as I've shown, people, the yin-yang is like a moon. So Jesus portrays himself as a prophet howling at the yin-yang as if it is a moon. Now the moon is a false prophet in the sense that what you see when you're looking at the moon is sunlight and not moonlight. So we talk about moonlight, and that is a phenomena, but moonlight is reflected sunlight. So it is false in the sense of, like, you could argue maybe comically that the moon is taking credit for the sunlight because it's shining, and it's not, there's no copyright statement or something that says, oh, this came from the sun. But just as wolves howl at the moon reflecting the sunlight is almost like howling after a lost lover. But it is false in the sense that moonlight is actually reflected sunlight. So you have, the concept of a prophet, the concept of a lamb, a concept of falseness, and the concept of a wolf. All of those things kind of connect together. But so effectively, sometimes Jesus was teaching at a time when he needed to employ subtext to get points across. He wanted to die at a particular time, not right away. And he had many different reasons. If you look at a dictionary and you look at certain words that have a lot of different senses, if you don't want to read the dictionary, this video isn't for you, and lots of things aren't. But or consider, be curious about things in general. But there are many different senses of what Jesus does. And so one of the other things that Jesus says that I want to talk about is, he says, it is not what enters a man that defiles him, but what exits, what leaves him, that defiles him. And that seems kind of odd. You think about being defiled, like almost like being poisoned or being contaminated or being corrupted. in all of the ways in which contamination and corruption occur, as we understand it, it's something entering the body, like internalizing something, whether through eating or contact with someone else that's infected, something like that. So it's kind of an odd statement to make, and it's meant to be thought-provoking. Well, what does he actually mean by that? So then you have to consider the idea of defilement in the context of when he says things like, judge not lest you be judged, according to the same measure that you judge. So if you think about defilement as judgment, judging someone as defiled, whether it be yourself or whether it be someone else, then you could get a different view of what defilement might mean. Now, when he says beware of false prophets who appear one way but are inwardly something else, that is another way to view that is some kind of contamination. Like, and to say that would provoke like paranoia or fear, like, well, I have to watch out because someone might not only not be what they're presenting themselves as, but they might contain something that's dangerous. A wolf will eat you. A wolf will kill you. A wolf, you can imagine like someone who's contaminated with a virus who contaminates someone else. They have inwardly they contain a wolf that will eat that person alive from the inside. And then when you get to when you connect that with the verse that I mentioned about defilement, you can imagine that someone who becomes infected, like lepers, which Jesus spent some time with curing lepers, they were ostracized, they were isolated, they were judged, they were viewed as being contaminated. So Jesus healed lepers. It was not just for people to be set out from society the way that they were. So you throw all those things together, and then you get the idea of how the enemy might use that, and how, like, if someone, for instance, recently, well, all right, do I want to tell this story? Yeah. So if you you know what I'll do? I'll use the movie Office Space. In the movie Office Space, starring Jennifer Aniston, the lovely Jennifer Aniston, she's a waitress, and she ends up encountering an office employee who has had this experience. He was being hypnotized to, I believe it was to, I don't know what it was. It might have been to quit cigarettes, but anyway, he's being hypnotized, and the hypnotist dies during the hypnosis session, leaving him in a state of quasi-hypnosis where he doesn't really care much about anything, he doesn't stress about anything, and his life gets a lot better. But he ends up encountering a waitress played by Jennifer Aniston, very beautiful, and they end up having a conversation at some point, and she talks about an ex of hers named Lumberg. The office employee has a boss named Lumberg who is he is the ultimate moron. You got to watch Office Space. It is one of the greatest movies, particularly if you live in an office. I used to watch it periodically as like a therapy session because it's hysterically funny and it's very insightful. There's a lot to it. So, but he has this detestable boss named Lumberg who is just, he comes over and he drones on about the most boring fucking shit, and he's cruel. They isolate this one guy who has this red face. His name's Milton, and they give him a red stapler, and then they take it from him, and they keep moving him around to worse and worse places. They end up putting him in the basement. Eventually, he sets the whole fucking office on fire. Milton does, the red-faced guy. But that's the end of the Office Space movie. But the point I'm trying to make is that Lumberg is disgusting. He's repulsive, and the office employee who's dating Jennifer Aniston cannot imagine a worse human being and a more boring human being. And to think that his girlfriend previously dated and had sex with that guy just sends him into he doesn't worry about anything until that happens. He just, like, this is the most disgusting thing I can possibly imagine. It turns out later that there's two different Lumbergs, just as words have different senses. Multiple people can share the same name. So it turned out it was a different Lumberg that was her ex, but that going back to the biblical stuff, defilement. She was, in his mind, she was defiled, but what might come out of her, like the thought of kissing her mouth, knowing that lumber had been in her mouth, was beyond repulsive to him. It's the most disgusting thing you could possibly imagine. And if you project that to other body parts, it gets even worse. The same thing would be true, can be true, for people who have contracted a venereal disease from a partner. So it can be a strategy of fucking monstrous insects who don't belong on our planet to actually contaminate people in these various ways. One way is to actually knowingly have a venereal disease, for an example, and to contaminate someone with it. Then that person, who no doubt had self-worth issues and self-esteem issues prior to the event that led to the contraction of the disease, because otherwise why would they have assented? Or maybe they didn't consent, depending on the, it gets very muddled. Monsters use lots of things, chemicals and other shit, and manipulation and torture to get people to do things. Anyway, they become contaminated, and they become contaminated in their own eyes, defiled, and even more less than, completely unlovable. And that is a strategy that someone will use, because an unlovable person will then seek love, or any proxy for love that they could possibly find, even with the most detestable fucking insectoid, mosquito, fucking monstrous vermin that walk the planet, because we all have a human need to be loved. And so it is actually the most, it is hard to imagine a more awful, I mean, there are other things that they do that are equally awful, but it is hard to imagine a more evil, awful, detestable, universally unlikable thing than to knowingly infect someone with a disease. And it could be done, they could catch it through, if they're a drug user, they could catch it via needles or anything else. And with the intention of, even though the disease, lots of these diseases can be treated effectively now, the intention is to make themselves feel unlovable, and to make them unlovable in the eyes of others, so that they can be isolated from the herd. It's like mosquitoes sort of hunting like wolves, but they don't have the capacity, they don't have the hunting ability of wolves, so instead they infect. Like mosquitoes will infect people with malaria when they bite them. And it's a disease, and it needs to be, literally, and it needs to be eradicated. So this is happening, this occurs, and it's going to end. But that's the idea of bewaring of false, because you end up having to beware of false prophets all over the place. You know what I mean? And if you think about sheep's clothing, it is white, and so are certain bodily fluids that can come out of a man, which could contain an infection. So that is a sense in which Jesus was talking. It can purposely diseasing someone, whether it be a psychological disease, traumatizing them so that they have PTSD or chronic anxiety or depression, paranoia, suicidal ideation intentionally. That's the most evil types of things that can be done. It's actually, when you think about the worst of the worst cockroaches that were concentration camps guards, it's you can make a strong argument in that, and I feel that they're even worse. And so if you think about like how proud the Nazis, as detestable and unlikable the Nazi party was what it does. They had flags, they had parades, they had uniforms. They were proud of themselves. They were as misguided as you could possibly be, but there was some pride there. These fuckers don't have that, because they know, as dim as the light in their consciences is, they know what they're doing, and they know what kind of fucking horror will be brought down on them when they understand that everybody else understands what they've been doing. So the lambs that they hurt and they want to hurt, they're wolves too, in sheep's clothing, and they've got themselves the biggest fucking problem that ever existed on the planet Earth.